All right then. Are my judges ready? And the timer? The affirmative team? And Roman? All right. Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn once said, "Until the possible becomes actual, it's only a distraction." What I'm going to prove in this first negative breach is that the affirmative plan is only possible, not actual. Theory, not reality. And the benefits of the affirmative team are unfounded. I'm going to do this by first of all presenting you with a criterion. We believe this round should be judged through the criterion and weighing mechanism of stock issues. We believe the affirmative team has the burden to uphold the standards of team policy debate before their ballot is merited. Now the affirmative team, according to the standards of policy debate, have to uphold all four of these stock issues. That is, significance, is there a substantial reform? Inherency, what's the current system regarding the affirmative plan? Topicality, are they making reform toward Russia? And fourth is solvency, whether or not the affirmative team can solve. So in this speech, we're going to be looking at 4 solvency points, or 4 reasons why the affirmative team can actually solve for the harm that they presented to you. And given, at the end of the speech, we'll be disproving one of the 4 stock issues the affirmative team needs to uphold. The affirmative ballot, at the end of the speech, will not be merited. We're going to go straight into those solvency issues. And I would like to go into these with the mindset that if the affirmative team cannot, by the end of the round, if the affirmative team hasn't proven you solvency of their plan, then it is not merited. Solvency point 1 is Russia won't ratify. Russia won't ratify. And the simple fact is that in order for the United States to get the benefits of BIT that the affirmative team claimed, Russia would have to ratify such an agreement. Now I'm going to look at 4 subpoints, or 4 reasons why Russia won't ratify a BIT. Subpoint A is empirical refusal. Empirical refusal. And we're going to take a look at how the United States and Russia were about to ratify a BIT treaty in 1992, but Russia decided not to ratify it. Now, the affirmative team talked a little bit about this in their speech, and I'll be addressing that after I read a quote from Deutsche Bank, which is a major international universal bank, quoting Dr. Thornton Nesman, who's a PhD. He said in July 2009, quote, "Russia has not ratified the bilateral investment treaty concluded with the U.S. in 1992, unquote. So all these years back, all the way back in 1992, the United States and Russia had a possible BIT agreement. And even in today's world, in 2011, Russia still has not ratified that BIT agreement. Now the affirmative team talked about how this was about Russia's legal system and their constitution, etc., etc. But if Russia was actually that interested in a BIT, they would have pursued this 1992 model that the United States and Russia had agreed upon, and they would have ratified this agreement. The fact is, Russia didn't ratify this agreement. There's empirical refusal supporting the negative team that Russia will not, in fact, ratify the affirmative team's plan. Now, subpoint B is frozen BIT process. Frozen BIT process. And we're going to look at a recent piece of evidence talking about how Russia is no longer ratifying BITs with other countries. We're going to read a quote from Business Law International, which is the leading law journal devoted to international commercial and investment issues. It was quoted in May 2008 saying, quote, "Russia's Deputy Minister of Economic Development and Trade admitted as much in 2001, stating, the freeze on new BITs was undertaken to avoid granting any, quote, new privileges, unquote, to foreign investors, unquote." So in 2008, Russia made a statement that they are making a freeze on BIT treaties, that Russia is no longer going to be ratifying BITs with other countries. That's it. Case closed. Russia doesn't want a BIT with another country. The United States is another country. Therefore, Russia doesn't want a BIT with the United States. And so the affirmative plan, Russia will not ratify because they've made a clear statement that they will not do a BIT with the United States or with any other country in the world right now. In today's system, Russia doesn't want a BIT. The affirmative plan cannot solve. Furthermore, let's look at subpoint 3, rejecting U.S. dollar. Rejecting U.S. dollar. And we're going to look at a recent development in the United States-Russian trade relationship where Russia has begun refusing to invest in the United States dollar because they don't want to be involved in the risk of our economy. We're going to quote from China Daily, which is an English language daily newspaper in China. It reported in November 2010, quote, "China and Russia have decided to renounce the U.S. dollar and resort to using their own currencies for bilateral trade." Pang Zongqing, who specializes in international politics at the Renmin University, said, "The proposal is aimed at avoiding the risk the dollar represents," unquote. So Russia and China have essentially been ditching the United States dollar because they don't want to get involved in the risks of the United States economy. So Russia doesn't want to increase investment with the United States right now because they're afraid of being tied to our economy. Now subpoint D is investor protections. Investor protections. And the fact is that Russia has in fact decided that they're not going to ratify a BIT that has investor protections. I'm going to read a quote from Noah Rubens, who's a JD in 2008. He said, quote, Russia's Deputy Minister of Trade said in 2001 that the freeze on new BITs was undertaken to avoid granting any new privileges to foreign investors, unquote. You may recognize this quote because I read it earlier in the solvency points, but I'm going to develop a bit more here. So Russia decided that they're not going to do BITs because it gives too many privileges to foreign investors, too many protections to foreign investors. Now, one of the main advantages of the affirmative plan that they claim is investor protection. But Russia has stated that they will not ratify BITs that have investor protection. So this means that Russia won't ratify the affirmative plan. If the affirmative team wants to have a BIT that claims their advantages, it's one that Russia is not going to ratify. So the likely BIT between the United States and Russia will not have these investor protections. Let's move on to solvency point 2, lack of investor will. Lack of investor will. And the fact is that, first of all, BITs don't actually increase investment that much. And second of all, investors don't want to invest in Russia. I'm going to read a quote from Jason Webb-Yaki. This is under my subpoint A, empirical failure. Empirical failure. And in the past, BITs have failed to provide proper investment. Jacob Webb-Yaki, who's a JD, said in 2008, quote, researching the law and society tradition suggests a more pessimistic assessment. For reasons of legal ignorance, pluralism, and ambiguity, even the formerly strongest BITs are unlikely to be associated with significant increases in foreign investment, unquote. So this is clearly saying that even the strongest BITs between countries fail to produce adequate increase in investment between the two countries. So simply, people aren't investing with BITs. BIT has failed to provide proper investment. Now we're going to take a look at subpoint B. Subpoint B is Russian investors declining. Russian investors declining. I'm going to read a quote from Bloomberg News in 2011, January, talking about how investors are actually pulling out of Russia. Quote, bondholders are more cautious on concern that Russian money is leaving the country and economic growth is too dependent on energy prices. Investors pulled a net $38.3 billion out of Russia last year, according to central bank data, unquote. So we see that investors are actually beginning to look at Russia's market, look at Russia's economy, and say, okay, this isn't what we want for our strength. Russia's economy isn't strong enough for us to invest in. So really, investors aren't interested in Russia right now. Therefore, investment under the affirmative plan, if Russia chose to ratify it, would not be increased because United States investors simply aren't interested in Russia. I'd like to also point out that the affirmative team can't mandate that the private companies invest in Russia. This is just something that they claim that they opened the door for. Now, solvency point 3 is that 2004 model fails. 2004 model fails. I'm going to read a quote from the U.S.-China and Economic Security Council. This said in April 2010, quote, all U.S. BITs are based on a model BIT that was last revised in 2004. The model is in the process of another revision, unquote. So our government is currently revising the 2004 model BIT. Why is this? Because the government decided that this model BIT was not adequate and would not in fact provide us with great benefits. So we see that until the possible becomes actual, it's only a distraction. And there's no solvency the affirmative team can claim. Thank you.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Now going down to your first point, we were talking about stock issues, correct?
Yeah.
Now starting off with significance. Now you agree that our plan is significant, correct?
No, if Russia doesn't ratify it, it's not significant.
Alright, so secondly going down to inherency, we have provided evidence on inherency, correct?
We talked about this a little bit, but inherent in the status quo is that Russia is refusing to ratify BIT.
Alright, so going down to the next issue, you do agree that our plan is topical, correct?
It is a reform toward Russia, yes, but this is only one of the stock issues out of the 4 the affirmative team,
All right, so let's
according
go
to
down.
policy-based standards, have to uphold.
Alright, so let's go down to the next point. On
All
your
right.
solvency point number 1, you said that Russia won't ratify. Your first point was talking about empirical refusal,
Yeah.
correct? Now you do agree that this BIT that was signed in 1992 is about 20 years old.
It is, yeah, and if Russia had actually wanted a BIT, they would have pursued this process of either revising this 1992 model or ratifying it.
All right, so did you respond to the evidence that was brought up in the 1XC talking about how they want a new BIT, not an old one?
I actually did talk about this a little bit. My response to this was that if Russia was invested in a BIT, they would currently be pursuing the United States for one, and you failed to provide evidence recently that Russia is in fact pursuing a BIT.
All right, let's go down to the next point. You were talking about that they have a frozen BIT.
Yeah.
Now, in this specific piece of evidence, it was from May 2008, but it was quoting the trade representative, a quote from 2001, correct?
It was talking about how his statement, oh, yes, this is talking about 2001, yep.
His statement was in 2001, correct?
Yes.
All right, can I see the evidence, please?
Sure. This is one in the middle of the page.
All right, thank you. Now, going on to your next point, you were saying that they're going to reject U.S. dollars.
Yes.
Right? Now, this was from China newspaper, correct?
Talking about how China and Russia have taken
All
this
right,
step.
so it talked about a Chinese leader, and he talked about how he's going to refuse it. Now, where is the point? Can you point out in the evidence where the Russian leader said this as well?
You actually have it back at the table. It's on the same page. It was talking about, it was the Chinese newspaper talking about China and Russia have done this.
All right, so did a Russian leader actually have this statement?
No, this is
All
the
right, so-
newspaper talking about what's on the news.
All right, so let's go down to the next point. Going down, you were saying that they're investors' protections.
Yeah.
Now, again, this was, again, from this statement was in 2001, correct?
It was, yes.
All right, can I also see that piece of evidence?
Actually, it's this one right here.
All right, thank you. Now, going down to your next point, you said that there's a lack of investors' will.
Yeah.
Now, specifically, this is from, or you were talking about, what specific BITs was this talking about?
This is talking about the strongest BITs,
All
the
right.
most firm BITs.
All right, so what are these? What countries, how many of them, what specifics is this study based off of?
This piece of evidence didn't talk about a specific country. It was talking about how empirically, even the most formal, even the strongest, even the best BITs have failed to produce great investment.
All right, but there's no specifics. And also, can I see this piece of evidence?
Yeah, this one right here.
All right, thank you. Now, going down to the next point, you were saying that Russian investors are declining, correct? Now, this was specifically from the energy part of the economy, correct?
This was talking about specifically, it mentioned the word energy prices, but it was talking about as a whole, the bondholders and the investors are looking at Russia's economy and measuring it and saying,
All right.
this isn't strong enough
All
for
right,
us
I'd
to
like to see
invest
this
in.
piece of evidence.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
All right.